Good morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Today's scripture reading is Ecclesiastes 9, 1 through 18. For I considered all this in my heart, so that I could declare it all, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hands of God. People know neither love nor hatred by anything they see before them. All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes the oath, as he who fears an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to all. Truly the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil. Madness is in the hearts while they live, and after they go to the dead. But for him who is joined in the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for their memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, their hatred, and their envy they have now perished. Never more will they have a share in anything done under the sun. Go eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with merry heart. For God has already accepted your works. Let your garments always be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun. All your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or a device of knowing or wisdom in the grave where you are going. I returned, saw under the sun, that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor the bread to the wise, nor the riches of men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happen to them all. For man also does not know his time. Like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare, so the sons of men are snared into evil time, when it falls under suddenly upon them. This wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and the great king came against it, besieged it, and built great snares around it. Now there was found in that poor wise man, and he is wise, and his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that same poor man. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words for wise spoken quietly should be heard, rather than the shout of ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good.
All right, it seems like Solomon is making some progress here from a self-centered life to a God-centered life. I don't mean to be obnoxious by repeating every week. What I want is for everybody to get the whole picture of this book of Ecclesiastes, because I think that's how we understand things best. So once again, chapter 1, Solomon, when he was 12 years old, became king. You know that, and God gave him this great wisdom because he asked for it. But then wisdom has to be used. It has to be put into practice, and he kind of forgot about it and drifted away from God. And so he became very self-centered. And so in chapter 1, he's trying to find the meaning of life through science without God in the equation. And of course, he found life to be meaningless. In chapter 2, he tried to find satisfaction in life, but without God in the equation. And so his life was not only meaningless, but miserable. In chapter 3, he's being torn up by this. So he tried to find solace in just the everyday events of life, the routines of life, but he found life to be monotonous. And then in chapter 4, he made kind of a baby step in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, he starts thinking about somebody besides himself. Of course, he's thinking about people who are oppressed in his world, but he didn't do anything about it. But at least he's finally thinking about someone beside himself. In fact, he himself is an oppressive king. We know that from later on, things that happened. But anyway, he still made a baby step in the right direction. And then in chapter 5 and 6, he finally really gets his mind on God. He gets his mind where it needs to be. He talks about worship and wealth and so on in those 2 chapters. In chapter 7, then he begins to talk about the better things in life. It's better to be rebuked by a wise man than to be flattered by fools. It's better to be in the mortuary than to be in the banqueting hall, because if once you get a handle on your own mortality, then you begin to think of eternal things. In chapter 8, he gives us some really good instructions about how to get along with the king and being loyal to the government you have to be under, and the fact that timing is just as important as know-how in doing projects and so on. And so he gives us some really good counsel. And now we finally get to chapter 9, and I think it all boils down to these few words. Live till you die. Live till you die. In other words, don't squander your earthly life. Don't just coast through life. Live till you die. Only one life. 'Twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Those were written by a missionary that was in a very remote land, living a sacrificial life for the Lord, but only one life. 'Twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. So live till you die. Don't squander this early life. So he gives us 8 essential truths here. And the first one is that life is unpredictable. If you're taking notes, filling in blanks, life is unpredictable. Let's start with verse 1. He says, "For I considered all this in my heart, so that I should declare it all, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. People know neither love nor hatred," and I think what he means by that, by anything that they see before them, I think he's saying that love and hatred are things that are already in our heart. Love is in our heart because we're made in the image of God. Hatred is in our heart because of our fallen nature. So those things are there. People know neither love nor hatred by anything they see before them, because it's already there. But contrast this verse 1 with verse 11. Just skip down to verse 11 and look what he says. "I returned and I saw under the sun." Now, under the sun means that God's out of the equation here. "The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all." And when I read those words, I thought, man, he must have fallen back down into this despair that he's been struggling with to say such a thing. Because this is the language of atheists. This is the language of the evolutionists. That time plus space plus chance equals the universe that we live in. This amazing, incredible, beautiful, complex universe that we're living in is just the product of time plus space plus chance. Isn't that stupid? It is so stupid that kids have to be brainwashed preschool through college to believe it, because that's how stupid it is. The only way that anybody could believe it is through brainwashing. So time plus space plus chance equals the universe that we live in. You know, life does seem random at times, but God is the creator and Lord, and he's over all. And we're not the products of evolution. I watched a nature show just the other day. It was on ABC, of all things, but it was on prime time, and it was showing the strangest animals. I've never seen any animals like that before. Odd animals and plants. And yet they all got along with their environment just perfectly because God created them. But, we're not the products of evolution. So verse 1 is spot on. He says that their works are in the hand of God. But somehow, I'm not sure why he says this in verse 11. "I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor the bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all." In other words, it's like he's saying, it's all just a matter of good or bad luck. Now, successful people usually don't say that. It's usually people that are very unsuccessful. They say, well, life is just good or bad luck. Some have all the luck. But that seems to be what he's saying. But life is predictable. We do know that. You don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. We don't know when we're going to die. It could be today. We could just, like that, out of the blue. We don't know what's going to happen. Life is unpredictable, but it is all in God's hands. So that's the first thing he says. Life is unpredictable. Now, the second thing he says is, we're all going to die. Sort of like a disaster movie, we're all going to die. When I was teaching Christian Evidences one year over at Heartland Christian School, I had a student who had a really neat sense of humor, and his timing was really good. And it seemed like just as somebody said the appropriate thing, he would come up with, we're all going to die. But that's what Solomon is saying. We're all going to die. Look at verses 2 and 3. All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good, the clean, the unclean, to him who sacrifices, to him who does not sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner, he who takes an oath, he who fears an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to all. What thing happens to all? Somebody tell me. People don't like to answer obvious questions, but somebody just say it. Yeah, we die. We all die. And this really bothered him. This is the third time at least that he brings this up, and it bugs him. Truly the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they all go to the dead. So it bothered him earlier in this book, the fact that the wise man dies just like the fool. Doesn't seem right. And it bothers him that people die just like animals, except animals evidently don't have souls. But death is the great leveler. And this bothered Solomon, who was the great king over Israel and held all his wealth. And it really bugged him that death is the great leveler that it is. But when you come to terms with your mortality, that should motivate you to devote your earthly life to things that matter, to devote your earthly life to eternal things of eternal significance. See, that's what he's saying here. We're all going to die. Life is unpredictable. We're all going to die. And look at verse 12. He even talks about how unpredictable the way of our death is. Verse 12, he says, for man also does not know his time, like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it falls suddenly upon them. Unexpectedly, in ways that we never might imagine. Maybe most of us will die of old age, but some of us might die the most weird way. So that's what he's saying. Now, the third thing that he tells us, though, is to serve God while you can. And that's spot on. Look at verses 4 through 6. He says, but for him who is joined to all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, why did he say that? Well, the Israelites hated dogs. They despised dogs. Dogs are these dirty curs that were running, to and fro in the streets of the city, eating garbage. And dogs were way down here, in their opinion. They're not like today, where people groom their dogs and put bows in their hairs and enter them in contests. No, dogs were despised, but lions, they were really highly admired. Lions are powerful. Lions are the king of beasts. Lions were beautiful and graceful. So lions were great, but look how he turns this upside down then. In verse 4, he says, but for him who is joined to all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. You see, a living dog is better than a dead lion. Verse 5, for the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Now, when he says the dead know nothing, he's talking about the corpse in the ground. The corpse in the coffin underneath the ground knows nothing. Now, we know because of New Testament revelation that the soul and the spirit are either in paradise or Hades and completely aware of the things that are going on. One is waiting for heaven and the other is waiting for hell. But when he talks about the fact that they know nothing, the dead know nothing, he's just talking about the corpse in the ground here. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, their hatred, their envy have now perished. Nevermore will they have a share in anything done under the Son. So, people who have died, their soul is still conscious in paradise or Hades, but they can't serve the Lord anymore. There's no possibility of doing that. And those spirits in Hades or paradise are awaiting the resurrection of their bodies when they'll either end up in heaven or hell. So serve God while you can is what he's saying. Serve God here and now. Serve God here on earth. Work, for the night is coming when men can work no more. Right now, when you can, serve the Lord. That's what he's saying. So life is unpredictable. So we're all going to die, so serve God. And then fourth, make the most of this life. Verses 7 through 10. Look what he says. Unsaved people, I'm sure they have the idea that if God just can get a hold of them, he'll make their lives miserable. All kinds of rules and regulations, and he'll do what he can to make their life miserable, but that's just the opposite. You and I know that. Verse 7, he says, go, eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a merry heart. He wants us to be happy. And by the way, many years ago, there was a lady on Entertainment Tonight whose name was Mary Hart. And it just occurred to me, Mary Hart. He says, serve the Lord with a merry heart. Whatever. Let your garments always be white. That is, wear your best. Keep it clean. Let your head lack no oil. Oil is a picture of prosperity. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all of your days of vanity. I don't know if he knew what it was like to live with one wife. For that is your portion in life and in the labor which you perform under the sun. And look what he says in verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. In other words, don't live half-heartedly, for there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. But what's he saying? He's saying God wants you to enjoy this earthly life that he's given you. He doesn't want you to be miserable. He doesn't want you to be a blah. He wants you to be rejoicing in the life that he's given you from day to day. Because he's given us a wonderful, if you know Christ as your Savior, it's a wonderful life. Tremendous, tremendous life. So, and enjoy your earthly blessings as well as your eternal blessings that you're looking forward to. Serve the Lord, if you serve the Lord in the power and guidance and love of God, that's the most fulfilling and satisfying life that you could ever live. If you're serving the Lord in the guidance, power, and love of God, you can't find a more satisfying and meaningful life to live. That's it right there. So make the most of this life and enjoy your earthly blessings as well. Verse 5, he says wisdom can defeat military might. This is almost like a parenthesis here. Verse 13, this wisdom, verse 13, this wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city, I think its name was Mingo, with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it and built great snares around it. So here comes this king with his powerful army and surrounds the town, puts it under siege. But look what happens in verse 15. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. The man's wisdom saved the town. And so Mingo still stands. Now, but we're not told how he did it. Was it by negotiation? Was it by a clever military maneuver? Was it by a clever disappearing act? I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. We're not told. Only that the man's wisdom saved the town. The poor man's wisdom saved the town. But look what happens next in the last part of verse 15. Yet a poor man's wisdom counts for nothing. Last part of verse 15, he says, yet no one remembered that same poor man. Why? Because he was poor. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength, and nevertheless the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. So why would somebody despise a poor man's wisdom? Well, because if a person's poor, then that makes them look unsuccessful, and it makes them look like they're not so wise, like they're a failure. I think it's a sad day when people are judged by external things. A sad day when people are judged by external things like race. External things like attractiveness or unattractiveness. External things like wealth or poverty. Rather than by character. I think it's a sad day when people are judged by these external things. I agree with what Martin Luther King said so many years ago, that he was looking forward to a time when people would be judged by their character rather than by the color of their skin, for example. Racism is stupid. It's the most stupid thing I can imagine. It's absolutely stupid. And it's just a strange kind of snobbery, I guess, is what it is. And so he says, wisdom can defeat military might, yet a poor man's wisdom counts for nothing. And then he says, yelling doesn't make your message true. Look at verse 17. Words of the wise spoken quietly should be heard rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. You know, some people think that by yelling they can prove their point. You've had people do that, and they're pointing their finger and they're yelling at you and they're trying to, and they think they're proving their point. The truth has to be shouted, they think. But it doesn't have to be shouted. The truth speaks for itself. You know, they're thinking, if I can just out-yell you, I'm going to win this argument. But the truth speaks for itself. It doesn't have to be shouted. And then finally, one sinner can wreck what wisdom has built. And this is a powerful statement in verse 18. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. One foolish act, one foolish word by a professing Christian can do untold damage, permanent damage. So be careful what you say. Be careful what you do. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little tongue, what you say. Be careful, little feet, where you go. And be careful, little hands, what you do. But not just little hands. One foolish act, a sinful, foolish word by a professing Christian can do untold permanent damage. So be careful. So that's what he's saying. It seems like he's getting his feet on the ground spiritually. He's getting his eyes on the Lord, and he's saying some things that are very, very wise and important. He says, live till you die. Don't squander your earthly life. Life is unpredictable. We're all going to die. So serve the Lord while you can. Make the most of this life. Wisdom, he says, can even defeat military might. Yet a poor man's wisdom counts for nothing because people look at the external instead of the internal. But then he says, yelling does not make your message true, and one sinner can wreck what wisdom has built. So, Father in heaven, just help us to be careful what we say, what we do. Help us to make the most of this life you've given us. You want us to even enjoy the good things of life. But you don't want us to waste this life. There are people who need to be saved. There's people that need to be encouraged. We need to worship you from the bottom of our hearts and to love you and to love each other and show that love. Help us to make the most of the lives that you've given us, knowing especially that we don't even know if we have the rest of today. But help us to make the most of it. Whatever we do, to do it with all our might, guided and empowered by you. And I pray these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.